much. Just getting myself set up here. Can you hear me okay?
Sound great.
Okay. Let me just grab a couple of things here. I have to can't forget to press record. I've done that a few times.
Oh, that's terrible. That's terrible.
Have you ever done that?
Oh yeah, I've done everything wrong.
So it's been a while since I've done any sort of discussing the topic of Billy Meier. So I'm obviously going to be a little bit rusty, but hopefully you'll be a bit forgiving of that.
Oh,
so I'm just going to introduce my Nature's Way, and then introduce you, and ask you to do a little introduction, if you could, on the Billy Meier case, and then we'll flow into the mental fluidal powers and that whole thing.
Sounds good.
All right, let me just press record here. Welcome back, everyone, to Nature's Way. Today we're going to be joined by Mark Snyder of Ohio Exopolitics. Mark frequently spends time discussing the Billy Meier case, which includes many fascinating topics such as mental fluidal powers and the various other things that Billy Meier discusses. I'd like to introduce Mark. Mark, are you there?
Yes, right here.
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
I'm doing good. Yourself?
Not too bad. Mark, you've been discussing the Billy Meier case now for many years, and you've probably seen there's many avenues that the Billy Meier case takes, and many fascinating subjects there. Would you be able to just give us a little introduction to Billy Meier, and then perhaps we can go on and discuss some of those topics?
Sure, that's fine. Billy Meier, he's an 80-year-old man. He lives in a tiny mountain village in Switzerland called Hinterschmidruti, which is about 45 minutes east of Zurich. He grew up even a little farther north in Switzerland in an area called Dubhaltagh, in a little village called Niederflachs, which is surrounded by the Eichenmoser and Bruder Mountains, as well as wide forests and meadows. Billy, right around 1942, started to get telepathic messages from a man named Spath, and these messages continued. Billy would see Spath's face, hear his voice, and he was a little disturbed by all this. He didn't know what to think about him getting these mental messages. So he asked the pastor in his local village there, Pastor Rudolf Zimmerman, and Pastor Zimmerman encouraged him and said he should pay attention to these messages. Well, it seems that Pastor Zimmerman was also getting these telepathic contacts. The individual that was contacting Billy, and this time before Billy was even 5 years old, back in 1942, was a man named Spath, who lived in a star system some 80 light years beyond our Pleiades, a star system that's in a different space-time configuration than ours. And this is part of the case that gets very interesting and also somewhat challenging. Our universe, they tell us, is 46 trillion years old, which is much older than our scientists think, and that the material aspect of our universe is divided into 7 different space-time configurations. I like to look at these as like different rooms. And these human beings, these Pleiaren, they live in another room, so to speak, in our material universe. And the reason they contacted Billy is because they have the technology to identify spirit forms. And they recognized his spirit form had been incarnating on the earth for the past 13,000 years. And he's been the people that today we call Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. And his mission here on the earth is to put in writing what's called the teaching of the Spirit, which is recorded in about 50 different books that Billy has written. The books that I've focused on are called The Way to Live, The Psyche, The Might of Thoughts, and The Goblet of Truth. So, Billy is known as what you might call the universal prophet. So I say Billy, his spirit form, and he incarnates on different worlds in order to speed up the evolution on a given world. And that's kind of what he's doing here on the earth right now.
Yeah. And that's, thank you for doing that introduction there, Mark. That was brilliant. There's, for anybody coming to this material for the first time, I'm sure it's quite difficult to get your mind around it. Nonetheless, I think if you stick around, you'll find that there's the case of the Billy Meier case takes many roads, and none of them are, they're all very interesting. And if you really stick with it, I think you'll find that there's no belief necessary in order to try to understand the Billy Meier case, because all of the answers are there. It just takes a little bit of thinking to get through the material to find the truth in it. But one of the topics that really interested me, Mark, and I've been listening to your Ohio Exopolitics, and you've also covered the subject, and that is mental fluidal powers. I think there was another gentleman, Michael Utebrick, who's made a couple of great videos on the subject as well, and he's really got a grasp of the subject. Personally, I'm still trying to get my mind around it, but it's very interesting, and this all ties in with the might of the thoughts, which I hear you often speaking about. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea is everything that we think on a daily basis, it sends out. There's those thoughts are transmitted, and they're stored not only in the walls around us, the energies, but also they're stored on the frame of our body. And it's, I think, Mark, I'm just going to stop and just let you take over if you don't mind, because I think you have a better grasp of the subject than I. But would you like to step on there?
Sure. I have no problem with that. Michael Utebrick, I can never pronounce his name correctly. He's from Figu, Canada, and he's pretty much the expert outside of Billy on this. So everything that I tell you today comes from this wonderful YouTube that Michael's put out there, and it's based on a book that Billy has written, and the title of the book is in German, and I'm not going to even try to pronounce it because I'll probably just ruin the pronunciation, but it's a book all about these fluido energies. And Michael has a tremendous understanding of this. So everyone has mental fluidal powers, and we all have tremendous power in our thinking. It's just a matter of harnessing it. So, what happens with people, myself included, of course, is most of the time our thoughts drift. And we're sending out these fluidal energies, but they're coming from our subconscious and they're coming from our unconscious. The powers, they come from the thoughts and the feelings, and there's something called the swinging wave, which comes forth from your thinking and which contain the character of the human being and the movements of his consciousness. And the power that emanates from our thoughts settles in our skeleton, and it settles in our furniture, it settles in books, it settles in your home. You may have a sweatshirt that you really like, and you don't know why. When you put it on, you just feel good. Well, that's because probably every time you wore that sweatshirt or on a consistent basis, you've thought good, neutral, positive thoughts when you've had the sweatshirt on. So the residue of, so to speak, of these thoughts are stored in this sweatshirt. And for example, I have this Ohio State sweatshirt. For some reason, I must have had a lot of good thoughts when I put this thing on. So every time I put it on, I'm in that mindset automatically. So
is that they say, let's say, you wake up one morning, you're feeling great, you're sending out those good feeling vibes. So those, let's say those vibrations are being stored. You wake up, you put on a pair of clothes, and those energies are being stored in those clothes. So they're almost like a battery, been filled up with those good feelings. And so let's say you change into those in another day. Those energies have been released back into you. You're feeling those same feelings. Is that kind of what's going on there?
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a pretty accurate description. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is these energies settle in your skeleton, most of all into your bone structure, and that's one of the big takeaways I got from listening to this video was that you shouldn't cremate your body, because somehow subconsciously and or unconsciously, I guess, we do a back connection to the skeleton of our previous life, and this has great benefit in terms of us moving forward somehow in our evolution. So I just want to bring that out now so people can try to put that in their mind and remember to not.
So the same mental fluidal powers, those energies that are absorbed into the body, when somebody passes away, the body's buried, and in the teaching of Billy, reincarnation takes place, and in the new life, the former fluidal energies are picked up from the new life, so they're resonating with each other, so that there's I guess it helps with the consistency of evolution.
Yeah, maybe it's a synergy. I like the way you put that they resonate with each other. So maybe it's a support system somehow. I don't think he ever has completely elaborated on that, but I like that idea. That makes sense to me, the way you put that.
Yeah, I would think. I would imagine that there's obviously a reason for it, and obviously everything has to be consistent with the evolution of the the spirit, right? So that would kind of make sense to me that there's a reason that you're resonating with that former, or you're picking up those energies, I guess, from the former life. That's kind of how I think I would understand it anyway. Not that is correct. Now I wouldn't want to mislead anybody, but that would kind of seem, logical to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the character of a human being is actually deposited into the objects around him over time. So the swinging waves that are associated to your personality, to your psyche, your feelings or thoughts, they're deposited into books. For example, I think I've deposited some of those feelings into this Might of Thoughts book. So it puts every time, just by touching it, I almost reconnect with those positive energies. And the same way with the Way to Live book. Every time I kind of touch it, I feel like I reconnect with those positive energies. And these energies, they go into the walls, they go into your house, they go into your clothing, and they're deposited, and they create a world, like a world around us of security. And that's another thing that Michael brought out in this movie is because people are moving very often today, they don't get that reassurance of reconnecting with what's around them. And there is this great passage Billy has in one of his writings that says, "The incredible splendor of nature is the visible expression of the love of creation, and creation radiates love." And what I think that is that creation has also its own mental fluidal energies. So you can feel those mental fluidal energies of the creation itself, and I feel those more when I'm outside and in nature. But I think what happens is people, they kind of turn off their sensitivity. There is a word in the German called Empfinden, and it's a fine, sensitive feeling that I think has been kind of turned off. Most Earth humans don't have that fine, sensitive feeling anymore, so they can no longer connect with creation, and I think that allows for a lot of depressions and addictions that people have. They've lost the connection with creation that allows us to have that neutral, positive feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. I recently reconnected with a discussion I had with Vivian Legge, and it's amazing whenever you know, it was a discussion that we had and recorded on Nature's Way, and I just listened to that again, and it just dawned on me that Vivian Legge, she's going through and explaining the idea of nature and our, and we're discussing Billy Meier and the how if you reconnect with nature, you can begin to learn these laws of nature. And there were certain things there were certain dots that I hadn't really connected. And when I listened to that interview again, I just dawned on me, the explanation that she was given just really rounded things off for me. It gave me more of an insight. And that was, you often hear, just as you were saying, whenever you go out and you spend time in nature and start to, observe the characteristics of the various aspects of nature. It may just be a tree, how the tree goes through its cycles, or the animals, how they, move through the woods, or this or that, or the crickets, which I often hear yourself discussing. But the thing is that sort of dawned on me is that, we are also, a part of that nature, and we have our own inherent nature, and when we start to observe our own nature, so the way that we conduct ourselves throughout the day, our expressions, the way we interact with people, these are all expressions of our nature, of our character. And, obviously they're not always good expressions of our character, and they wouldn't always necessarily be consistent with what would be what would be progressive, let's say. So, let's say you have these nasty thoughts that would go against the laws of nature. Well, that would not be consistent with, progression, So I think the whole idea of observing and learning these laws of nature is trying to hone in these, on the way that we should be, I guess, conducting ourselves, or the characteristics that would be, progressive with nature. Does that make sense at all? I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I wonder if connecting with nature is a lot like the back connection to our own skeleton from a previous life.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow it's supporting us. And it's very interesting what you said about us not thinking. To put it simply, it's when we start to not think correctly. And I notice a lot of times when I first wake up in the morning is, you talk about not thinking correctly. It's like somehow during the night everything fell apart, and I'm waking up and I'm tired and I'm exhausted, and I have to rebuild step by step all my correct thinking. In other words, and I have kind of put together a thing from the book, from the Might of Thoughts book, that I tell myself, because when he describes neutral positive thinking, it has certain characteristics. So I'd have to tell myself, I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm thankful, I'm enthusiastic, I'm in harmony, I persevere, I persist, I endure, I am calm, I am satisfied, I have hope. So to just slowly bring myself back to thinking a right way, and then I tell myself, I'm the master of my own destiny. I'm the forger of my own fortune. I create the circumstances in my life through my good thoughts, my good feelings, my good habits. I create what I think I make real. And so I have to go through, it's like I have to go back to square one some days. I don't know why, but to rebuild the momentum that I had before, because the fluido energies that are coming out of me sometimes when I wake up are just extremely negative for whatever reason. And how do I sense that? Is by checking my feelings. Because the feelings come out of the thoughts. The emotions just rip up, but the feelings do come out of the thoughts. So
I'm going to tell you something. So I've heard you say that on a past one of your blog talk shows. About whenever you wake up in the morning, you may feel groggy and just not that you haven't got those positive thoughts,
right?
And I that connected with me, because I wake up in the morning and sometimes I'm just a grump,
Yeah, exactly.
Grumpy old man, it's like, get away from me, So, I'm thinking, okay, that Mark's giving me some advice here, it's like I'm going to try that, So, I've started to lift up the. I have the Goblet of Truth, so I've started to lift that book up, and I'll read that book for 3 or 4 pages, and that will set me up. I've found that sets me up
good,
at least for a few hours, and it's you hit the nail on the head. It really is helpful to sort of, when you're reconnecting with the concepts of the laws of nature and the way to, conduct yourself, which would be consistent with these laws of nature, then you find that those negative energies, you're letting them go, you're releasing them, and you're reconnecting with, a nature which is more positive.
What's interesting too is, and this comes again from these great YouTubes that Michael Udebrook has put out from Figu, Canada. He said a person can draw mental problems to themselves that already existed in a previous life and were not resolved. Now, I don't know where they come from. If they come from the storage banks, the universal storage banks, I don't know. But I wonder if maybe first thing in the morning, or who knows, just pure speculation, we can draw these wrong thinking habits back. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we have to steer our thoughts in order to get back into the positive thinking. In other words, we have to clarify and strengthen the good positive thoughts. Otherwise, because I think when we first wake up, we have automatic thoughts.
Right.
And the automatic thoughts tend to disturb the feelings and the psyche. So there we are, first thing in the morning, and what's interesting.
That's a very interesting way of explaining that. I never thought about that, Mark, and I think you'll be. That sounds that's very interesting.
Well, what's funny is I say things on my show that I forget I say. I've forgot that I've said that before. I guess I have before, but I think we have back connections to our previous life, and but that's a good thing as long as we don't fall into these traps related to our wrong thinking. And what happens is, I think the impulses from the previous life can be held in the storage banks, and these impulses will strike you over and over again for as long as you need them. And so it's like, oh, please give me a break. These impulses keep coming back.
Yeah.
And you're like,
that would kind of make sense that when you're sleeping, just like you said, that when you're sleeping, and maybe that is why there is a period of sleep that you're letting your mind, relax and open itself up to these, maybe to analyze the stuff from the day before or whatever, but also to open up to these fluidal power, fluidal energies that are connected with the former life, perhaps the consciousness block, or the previous former lives, or the consciousness block of the former lives. That's an interesting idea there, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's even more incredible, and I wish I had a better understanding of myself, because I look at my own behaviors and I think, I don't know why I'm doing that, but I feel compelled to do that. Like, if someone would have said, Mark, you're going to read this Might Have Thoughts book 8 times, I would have said, oh, there's no way I'm going to do that. I would not in a million years want to do that. Because I remember the first time I went to Arizona, to the Munns Park study, they were studying this book, and they were all reading sections from the book. I didn't even have the book at this point, so I had to look over someone's shoulder, or they had an extra book or something. And I'm serious. They would read a paragraph, and I would maybe understand 3 or 4 words out of it. That would be it.
Yeah.
And so I was seriously, and it was, I'm a technical person. I mean, I write computer code for a living, and I used to read this book and go, oh my goodness, this is.
Yeah.
And the same way with the psyche. I read this book. I remember the first 12 pages. I bought The Psyche from Michael Horn, and I bought the Might Have Thoughts from Michael Horn, and I think I got The Way to Live. I ordered it from Mike when he sent it to me later, but I read the first 20 pages in the Psyche. While I was sitting in the Flagstaff airport, I probably read it 6 times there, and then when I got home another 6 times, just to get the mechanics down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to understand that we have a spiritual consciousness and a material consciousness. I think understanding those two concepts are so critical, because what we're going into now, Dubhaltagh, is spiritual consciousness, you know, where the fluidal powers functioning. So we're starting to get into the stuff now that is really pretty amazing, because, for example, apparitions, you know, people are studying all over the world, what are ghosts, you know?
Right, yeah.
And they don't realize, and I would have never realized, that it's the power of our own subconscious or unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, for example, there's a story in the movie where this older lady, she takes a nap at about 4 p.m. every day, and during that nap, she has these strong memories of her childhood that come up, and then suddenly is this apparition that appears in the house of a little girl who walks around the house and sings, goes out into the garden. That's all from her mind.
And this is a lady that she's living, but she's in a sleeping state, and she's manifesting memories, or she's having sleeping memories of herself when she's a little girl, and that's actually manifesting into this kind of ghostly mirage. Is that what we're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, that's why this material, you know, once you really get into it, it really, it makes sense. You know what I mean? The logic of it, like, you know, like you said, there's so many shows on there. You could turn on the TV any night of the week, and you'll probably find 2 or 3 shows that are on ghost hunters, this or that. You know?
Yeah.
And one of the contacts that I started rereading all the contacts. I found the material in 2013, and you know, when I first started reading the contacts, it's like, you know, it's like an explosion going off in your head. So I started rereading them, and I'm starting to, you know, recognize stuff that I would have maybe brushed over before. And one of them was a discussion, and I think contact number 9, Billy. You know, he's just recently formed his little group. It's back in '75, I think it was. And they're starting to ask these questions, you know. And one of the questions was ghost recordings. So I guess where people would come forward and they would say, look, I recorded this message, and in the background, you know, there's this ghostly, you know, kind of talking going on. And, you know, if you heard that, you would think, oh my God, this is, you know, is there a ghost in my house or what have you?
Mm-hmm.
But whenever you get these explanations, so Billy puts this question forth to Samyazi, and she goes into you know, quite a bit of detail, but she gives this logical answer, and it's about these mental fluidal powers. So whenever let's say you're recording something in a let's say a tape recorder or whatever, the thoughts that you have, or let's say you have a question, but you also know the answer to it, and you're recording it into a tape recorder. Well, the mental fluidal powers are also storing themselves on that recorder, on that tape, and they will also get played back. So this is something that you wouldn't understand, or you know what I mean?
Sure, that's amazing. I didn't know that, but that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's it's trying to understand this whole concept of the mental fluidal powers, and then I think it's trying. You've got so many. You've got the consciousness block, the overall consciousness block, and trying to understand their place in, helping you evolve, and it's it gets a little bit confusing, but I think, like you said, you read, you reread, and you reread again, and the more you read, it's like, the dots just keep coming together, don't they?
Oh, they do, and I don't know why. Sometimes it seems like it takes me a long time to really absorb these things. I don't know why.
I don't think you're alone there, Mark.
For some reason, I just and sometimes I'm reading, and I don't think my conscious mind is really picking up on that much.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it must be going into my subconscious and my unconscious, where maybe I can work on it later, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But what it makes me think of is that there's just, our whole society is just really screwed up. We're just living so wrong that life has become a real struggle because we're living so incorrectly and in such a wrong way. And I'm just so thankful to have this ammunition. And to me, the book, The Might of Thoughts, is really for my own. It's my protection. It's my key to success. I mean, it's so strange to talk to people in the UFO phenomena sometimes in exopolitics, because they're talking about I don't know what they're talking about anymore these days, but there's a first stage of disclosure, which the world learns, wow, there are other people in the universe. And then there's the second stage of disclosure, which is all the higher learning and the higher thinking associated with these higher people in the universe. And I think we're very lucky to be able to have access to this information, don't you? I mean,
yeah, no, absolutely. It's a friend of mine. There's always this discussion back and forth. People say, why don't they just come down and just give us all this information and just make things easy. And I think the answer is that, if we were left, although we're given, let's say we've been given this huge, leapfrog in terms of helping us evolve. But if we were left to evolve ourselves, let's say, in a natural course that we're going now with religion and everything, it'd probably take us another couple of thousand years if we even made it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to be honest, I don't think we would make it.
Right.
I mean, we're teetering on, right now, just not making it. But I think somehow, we will get through this. But we've been given a gift, like you say. It's definitely been a gift, but it's not going to be without its challenges. It takes serious work, and
it does.
It takes, people can't. Yeah,
serious work. To get through this stuff. It's not. Wow. Why would they not just land on the White House lawn? Well, I think they've done that before. And I think in our ancient past, if you go back 150,000 years ago, 130,000 years ago, civilizations associated with Pelagon and the civilization associated with Atlantis and Lemuria, they were these higher human beings. And they had civilizations here on Earth. Well, there was also a naturally developing Earth human at the same time. So I think we've had trauma. The naturally developing Earth peoples have a deep ingrained trauma in their psyche associated with the contacts of these higher evolved human beings who had tremendous powers associated with their mental, their physical consciousness, but some of them didn't live according to the spiritual teachings. So we have a built-in trauma, much like a cargo cult in the Pacific. You know, those, I think it's kind of north and east of Australia. There's a chain of islands up there, Vanuatu, sometimes I think it's called, where the people never saw anyone from the outside world, and then suddenly they found themselves, boom, in the middle of World War II, and they're sitting on their little island out there looking at these ships firing these gigantic guns at each other and the planes flying over, and then before they know it, you know, these machines are coming onto their island and building airstrips, and now they have this whole religion built around this individual. I think they call him John Frum, who is kind of symbolic in a way of the GIs of the U.S. And they wait for John Frum to return.
Oh my goodness!
It's ghastly. It's just
so that really that idea there gives you the whole concept of what basically probably unfolded many thousands and thousands of years ago, as these naturally evolving tribes on the earth were moving along probably at a natural pace of evolvement. And then comes along, you know, these higher evolved beings, extraterrestrials, who are advanced in technology and maybe obviously somewhat advanced in spiritual matters too. But they went against their what is it, their own laws, and interacted and mated with these Earth inhabitants. Is that right?
You just reread Contact Report 9. I think there might be something in there about that.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's why they just don't come down here. I thank goodness they don't just come down here, because it would cause such a trauma on most people that we have enough trauma.
Yeah. So that was the earlier. That was the Pelagon. They were connected with the Pleiaren, weren't they? Wasn't that a faction of them, or an earlier? Yeah.
And a lot of the people from Atlantis and Lemuria, according to the Meier material, came from Beta Centauri, which I think in Aramaic, the word for that star is Hadar, Hadr, which means something like to come down from above and to settle on Earth, or something like that. I'd have to look that up in my notes again.
Yeah.
But
so is that why that's why the Pleiaren now feel obligated to correct the wrongs and make them right, just to kind of, because they interfered in the natural course, so they're kind of trying to help us reset now. Because the influence from these extraterrestrials, it made us see these people as gods, as creators, and it basically, you know, for generations now we've been evolving with these ideas and concepts of gods and created religions out of them. Was that the?
Oh, very much so. I think you bring up a very, very good point here. So, I mean, it's just like these apparitions we were talking about. If you don't have the basic understanding, and I've just gotten it within the past few months, your imagination can run wild trying to explain this stuff and trying to understand this stuff. And I think part of the trauma of slowly going through this evolutive process is coming to the grips of your own personal responsibility.
Right.
And the own incredible power of your own thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and geez, if you could go back through your life, step back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and try to live that whole, time again with what you know now, and to see if, you would think you would do better. Hopefully you would do better.
Yeah.
But these...
So...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just saying that these fluidal energies, these swinging waves, they also deposit themselves in churches and monasteries. And this is one thing people should keep in mind, is that for centuries, these fluidal energies will store themselves in churches and monasteries. Now, what happens in churches and monasteries? Well, you got funerals for one thing, so you got all that negative energy, all that grief associated with death that's stored into these structures. The other thing that, people get married in there, and that's all the stress of marriage and the intensity of all that's stored in there. And then over the centuries, all the people that have come into these churches and been praying for help and going through, difficult times, all that energy is stored in these churches. So be very careful about going into these old churches and monasteries.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, what do people typically go to church for? They're going to church maybe once a week, and they're going there to ask for forgiveness for all the things they've done. So, they're sitting there in their little pew, and, they've done, throughout the 7 days in that week, they've probably done quite a few things that were negative and everything, and now they're releasing these, they're recapping on these thoughts in their head, and now they're releasing them into that environment. So, it makes sense that churches could, they're just a big ball of negative energy.
And maybe that's why a lot of these priests become corrupted. I never thought of that before.
Yeah.
But if you were constantly being exposed to all this negative thinking, no wonder you would become corrupted. I mean, it's the same with policemen. I guess they're constantly being bombarded with all this negative thinking. No wonder they turn bad and abuse people and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And even doctors, I read last year that the doctors have the highest rate of suicide.
Suicide?
In our, and, it makes sense that on a daily basis, practitioner doctors are constantly getting barraged with people's, people are sick, they're going through mental struggles, and these doctors are having to absorb this, and that's obviously on a that's going on in an open fashion where people are actually discussing these things back and forth. But when you have somebody just sitting quietly in a church, as we talked about, it's still having the same effect. We're not actually talking about these things, maybe necessarily in an open way, but the thoughts, we're just beginning to understand how our thoughts have the same effect.
Here's something that kind of goes along with exactly what we're talking about. And this is just page 28 of the Might of Thoughts. It says, once, as a result of this, the human being understands how to guide his or her thoughts in a right and healthy wise, he or she thereby becomes not only the actual master of his or her thoughts, rather he or she actually becomes the Lord and master of himself and herself and his or her entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So the religions teach us that there is a God who's the master of our life. But we're actually the master of our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
What a different concept, huh?
Yeah. Can you give me, Mark, you do coding, right?
Yeah.
So if you talk about, there's one program here that works, but it's a program that's corrupted. So if you code it in this way, it'll move along, but eventually, it's going to crash. and then you have another program that is very clean, and that's going to move along in progress, and it can be built upon. If you look at that, we have programmed ourselves with this corrupted, train of thinking. It's, we're giving up our responsibility. We're praying to God, please give me forgiveness. So that's the corrupted code. And now we're trying to reprogram and clean things up. So we're taking a few steps back before we can take, maybe you could elaborate there, because you're a coder, does that, how could you?
That's a profound observation. I'm blown away by that. That is so profound. You've really made a great analogy there. We are a society that has built our whole society on corrupt programs, exactly like you said. Software that's filled with bugs that we can manifest, and we can see this. We can openly see the problems. Everyone recognizes the problems of the pedophilia in the Catholic Church, this blatant defect in our way of operating. And so you're right. And it's very slow. It's going to take a long time, but it's the teachings and the might of thoughts, the way to live, the psyche, the goblet of truth. And you're reading the Talmud right now, right? Talmud of Emmanuel?
I actually finished the Talmud, and I was going to pick it up again and start just reading it again from scratch, and I did start doing that, and I thought, you know what, maybe I should just move on to the Goblet of Truth and the Way to Live, and just, because I picked those up and then put them down, because there's just, I might get through 5 pages in a week or 6 pages in a week of the Goblet of Truth.
Oh, yeah. I for whatever reason, that one's kind of sitting in the background a little bit for me.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like I said, I wonder if it's my subconscious or unconscious mind that leads these decisions, because I don't really make the conscious decision to do these things. Do you, or like?
So maybe you're going off of an instinctive kind of guide there within yourself to kind of pick up certain books at certain times.
Yeah.
No, I would agree, and I kind of, when I'm in tune with, what I require, I certainly do that. Like, I've got, a few of these books, The Goblet of Truth, The Might of Thoughts, The Way to Live, and depending on what I need, I'll pick up one of those books. The Goblet of Truth it's a guide, but it also helps reprogram your thinking and the way to think. The Might of Thoughts really gets into the psychology, like really in depth. So that's perhaps a little bit harder, to go through, and you really probably have to pause a lot more with that book. The Way to Live, I think, is another guide, but again, it gets into the psychology, so it's kind of maybe it's a mix between the Goblet of Truth and the Might of Thoughts. That's my kind of.
So for you, the Goblet of Truth is easier.
Yeah, I would say the Goblet of Truth right now, even though I have to pause a lot, because you're still taking in concepts. Like the last page I was reading there was on marriage. And
it was on what?
The marriage.
Spell it.
How do I say that in my American voice? Marriage.
Marriage. Oh, okay.
Marriage.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was on marriage, and it's a couple of pages long, but the concepts in there are very logical. But again, you have to pause and you think about it, and then you'll move on to another page that's perhaps a little bit more in depth. But I think, yeah, it's certainly a bit easier than where I'm at now, anyway. At least than, let's say, the Might Have Thoughts, because that's that's there's a lot to take on there.
Well, the Goblet of Truth is humongous. That book is
huge. It's a monster.
And it has some very profound things in it.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I think it's very courageous on your part that you've taken on that monster as your step-by-step study.
Yeah, I often, I know I probably could. What I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to be more consistent, and kind of like you would with, let's say, if you were going to go to school, you have to study something.
Right.
That would be probably maybe the best way for me to kind of approach it. So I'm really trying to get the best out of it. And I hear people, I'm always asking people, how do you go about learning, certain books? And you'll get feedback like, well, when I'm reading through a page, I'll make notes on or highlight or do these sorts of things. I'm a little bit reluctant to highlight any of these books, because they're just gems, but maybe making notes would probably be a good idea, but I haven't really kind of got into that, but certainly, I read away at them, and I'm trying to be more habitual about that.
Do you have a hardcover Might Have Thoughts? Is there a hardcover Might Have Thoughts that you can get?
Hardcover.
Mine is paperback Might Have Thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I did purchase the Might Have Thoughts in a hardcover.
Okay.
And I left it. It's actually in Ireland. I left that book in Ireland on my last trip. I've been trying to get it back, but it's over there.
Oh, really?
I gave it to my sister. Hoping that she would, maybe have an interest in it.
Oh, wow.
But
now,
that's a hardcover.
Did you go to Switzerland when you were, or how did you just order it when you were?
No, I ordered that book. I think I got that book off of Michael Horn. Most of the books I've got directly from Michael Horn.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little bit like the Figure Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It's not maybe as streamlined. I don't think you can just put in your credit card and get an order.
No. I've never ordered from Figure yet. I've got to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice to get a book directly from them, but I don't think it's as streamlined. Michael Horn has it set up a little bit more, a little bit user-friendly, as you know.
Mm-hmm. We're very spoiled here in the United States, I think, with our convenience, aren't we?
Oh, geez, we are. It's like, we're given options, and obviously, like anything in nature, you tend to sort of take that easier path,
Yeah. Which makes me concerned because of, I think there is a global elite that's really trying to take our freedoms away and create a tyranny.
Yeah, we're getting taken advantage of, no doubt about it. And I love your optimism, because when I listen to your optimism is very, it's honorable, and I think your optimism is coming from that, your daily reading. I think it's having a really positive effect on you. It must be
good.
Because I think I find it hard to see the optimism.
Oh.
I mean, my optimism is this, right? And I guess this is where I am becoming more content. I think that we have to go through, all of this hardship. I think this hardship is coming. It's already pronouncing itself all over the world. With all, the many countries that are at war with, you're seeing Europe, and somehow we've been able to, keep most of that trouble, maybe, at least the war,
mm-hmm.
and the influx of migrants at bay.
Mm-hmm.
So those aspects we've been able to keep back, but that's obviously due to, our country, where we have a lot of power in the world, and we have a lot of money, so we can kind of keep those things at bay. But where the storm is erupting right now is within our country. It's people are just sick and tired, and they're becoming more aware of the corruption. And Billy Meier has predicted by 2020, I think the quote was, you'll be able to roll up the dollar and smoke it. And for when I first found the material and I read, I started reading these things, nothing was very clear to me at that point. And that's when I began to, not just believe in what he said, but now I wanted to know why he said that. So I started to really dig into these, why would that happen? Why would, by 2020, why would I be able to roll up the dollar and smoke it? Like, why would it have lost its worth? And now it's all really making sense. In 2013, there wasn't really much talk about this this new monetary system that was being created, and I guess now it's Russia, China, Brazil, India, the BRICS. They're creating this new monetary system, and it's going to be an alternative means of trade.
Mm-hmm.
For any sort of anything that can be bought and sold, will now be, those countries will be able to trade. And let's say, I think the direction that they're headed in is that the yuan, is it, or the yuan? How do you say that? Is going to be the currency that people are using to trade in. So, how is that going to affect us? Well, currently the United States dollar is what is used to trade. If you live in if you're a businessman in Australia and you want to buy and sell cars from China, you have to purchase those cars in the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to purchase so many millions of dollars, and all the trade is done in the dollar. So more and more countries now are going to be moving away from using the dollar as a means of trade, and that's where we're going to hit this brick wall here in the next couple of years.
Mm.
So that like I just went through the process that I had to go through. And the main thing is never to believe anything, and trying to find the reasons why, and do your own investigating and do your own digging. But to me, it all makes sense. So my long-term optimism is perhaps a couple or 300 or 400 years out. So, you know what I mean? So I know I'm going to reincarnate, but at the same time, I'm starting now. I'm starting to reprogram, recode my mind. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, that does take away the anxieties, because we're encouraged in the spiritual teaching to not fear death. And death is something to strive for, something that we inherently, naturally strive for without, most of us might look at it as something to be feared, but it's a natural process of evolving death, and we truly never die. We just change, this dimension
mm-hmm.
from one dimension to another.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that's kind of where I'm trying to focus my attention naturally these days, is places where in the material that are removing those anxieties, because they're really not needed. Whenever you see in the long run where we're headed, and it starts with me, starts with you, taking self-responsibility, and that's it.
Were you affected at all by the hurricanes and fires, at least psychologically?
I was definitely, it's definitely frustrating, because I know that it could be avoided.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that, this again goes back to nature, and it all ties together, and I've been thinking about that lately. You got to fight your battles. It's like you pick your battles. That's a battle that I'm not right now going to take on, but it's frustrating to watch because, why are there more hurricanes? Why are there more fires? And it's down to our practice, our daily practices throughout the world of polluting the earth, and the result of that is obviously visible, But again, we're not taking responsibility for it. Oh no, this isn't our fault. This I guess would be the Republican conservative stance, that there's no such thing as climate change, and this is just a natural thing that's happening, and they're washing their hands of it. They're letting the people wash their hands of it. They don't want to tell people, look, this is your responsibility. This is something that you have to start thinking about. And then you ask the question, why are they promoting that? And you find out that the answer lies in the money that these politicians are receiving from these big oil companies and what have you. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So we have disinformation from the mainstream and from the alternative when it comes to climate change.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably being interested in the Meier material puts you in the middle of the controversy. Mm-hmm. Because you're opposed to both entities, you know what I mean? You have ideas that are in conflict with both the mainstream as well as the alternative community. And I've always wondered why. I mean, I'm not a controversial person, but boy, here I am in the middle.
Yeah.
Big controversy.
Yeah.
I mean, look. For example, one thing that absolutely blew me away, and I know we're kind of digressing here and running out of time, but the whole story of Emmanuel, and then learning that there was no letter J in the ancient world, not in the Hebrew or the Greek. Mm-hmm. So the name Jesus didn't come around until maybe 1550 and then it wasn't even popular because 1611 version of the King James says our Lord and Savior IESVS or IESUS. So
would that not? And I've thought about that because it was you that first presented that to me, but then the thought came to me. Well, in the Billy Meier material, they tell us that his real name was Emmanuel, right? But it's also spelled with a J.
Exactly.
But that goes back. So, let's say the original text that was written by Judas Iscariot, and that's another discussion, but he would have originally written that spiritual teaching down in Aramaic, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. So when it was translated, all those years later, I think it was in the 70s or maybe the 60s or 70s by Isa Rashid, from Aramaic to German, and then from German into English. That's when they introduced the J. Is that right?
The letter J came in about 1550. There was an Italian playwright and scholar named Gian Giorgio Torricino that started substituting the I and the Y for the new letter J. So, for example, there was no book of Job in the 1611 version of the King James. It was the book of IOB. And the same for James and John. They had names that began with a Y that are just about unpronounceable. For the name that we today say, Jesus, it was IESUS or IESVS. Now, you brought up an interesting point about Emmanuel, the name Emmanuel and the letter J. Well, the letter J And I asked the people from Switzerland, Marianne, about this, and she said the letter
Yeah,
J
yeah.
was in the Lyrian. So none of the earthbound languages, not the Aramaic, the Hebrew, the Greek, none of those languages had the letter J. And it's very interesting because I have on my website all the Hebrew, modern Hebrew alphabet, the ancient Hebrew alphabet, and the Greek alphabets. And you can see there really was no letter J. There was no J sound. And the only reason I bring that up is because it really made me realize how programmed I was by religion and how it's so flimsy. I mean, they don't even know the name of the person, the real name of the person that they're quote unquote worshiping. Now think about that. That's stunning.
It is. And I'm trying to find the conflict there. I don't think there's a conflict with the Meier material because it was only recently translated. Maybe from German into English, the Talmud. So introducing the J would be just something, I guess, that would be consistent with the change that took place, back in the 1500s. I don't know if that's correct or not, but then you're saying that Marianne, she said that it was the J that was also in the Lyrian or Lyrian language, which is one of our earlier ancestors, right? We're
exactly.
Yeah. So there's many. Yeah.
So maybe that would be another point of discussion. Maybe we can clarify some of those things. But to me, it was a huge. My mind was spun around in a circle when I finally, because I really thought, how can, the Meier material must be wrong about this. So I went out with the perspective of trying to go out and see how the Meier material was in some way wrong, because we couldn't be confused about the name of the person that the whole Western society is centered around. But I found just the opposite. I found that, and it makes sense because if you look in Matthew chapter, 123 and Isaiah 7:14, it says, his name will be called Emmanuel in both the Old and the New Testament. And it's really interesting that religion will switch that around. If you ask a pastor or a religious person about that, he will say, oh, that's just a title. Emmanuel is just a title. Well, it isn't translated that way. It says his name will be called Emmanuel.
And that's where they slipped up, isn't it?
Oh yeah. In their own Bible, it's there. It's there. The truth is there. But it took me a long time to really myself come around to that. And this is my own slow, laborious, step by step. Yeah. It takes me a while to be convinced by things.
That's really the beauty of it, because it speaks to the fact that they were the people who have passed this down generation after generation. They never identified that text, and he will be called Emmanuel, as something that they needed to remove. They never identified the danger in it.
Yeah.
But I think people like yourself and others are recognizing now, only after coming across the Billy Meier material, the truth behind that, and are slowly but surely helping draw the lines between the two. And I think in the future that there'll certainly be things that scholars will spend much time writing about. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? They're important little pieces of the puzzle that will be that there'll be many arguments on, but eventually they'll help corroborate the material.
Well, yeah, we'll have to see. It'd be very interesting to see how that all evolves, won't it?
Yeah. But hey, Mark, I'm not going to keep you any longer. We're like you said, we were digressing there a little bit. It's fun to sit and go down all the little different avenues, and you never know which way you're going to go. But I'd love to sit down with you again, and maybe that'll be another topic for discussion.
And I'll try to hook you up with Daniel too.
Yeah, no, take your time, no problem. One of the ideas, I kind of got away from, recording videos for the channel, but I want to get back on it again, and I want to start discussing the contact notes.
Oh, really?
Just picking different contact notes and perhaps just start discussing the various subjects that are discussed in those. And I think that might be a little bit fun, So maybe Daniel might be interested in that, and yourself, and maybe others. So I'll send a few emails out over the coming weeks, and see if we can have another couple of discussions. But I really appreciate you coming and spending the time today to give me your feedback on fluidal energies, and I'm sure we could go into more on that as well.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Have a great day.
Bye, Dalton.